Chapter 278, Digging a New Well. After the first exchange, Ling Tian suddenly pulled out a weird posture in midair, waist bent, legs in a hooked shape and his hands outstretched in the same striking position as earlier. His entire body seemed to have turned into a bow, spinning like a pinwheel. He actually didn't land down, instead rising up once again, even higher than his previous altitude. From the side, Yu Bingyan astutely saw Ling Tian's hands and legs facing the same direction, forming a sort of ellipse, and using the force generated by his muscles, he propelled himself up once again. In midair, he took on the same stance of feet up, hands down, and like a shooting star rushed down towards Yu Tian. The exact same move, but with added momentum into the equation. A fiery and passionate gaze could be seen from Yu Tian's eyes. With a loud shout, he rushed upwards to meet him, both of his hands above him as he leaped upwards to face Ling Tian head-on. The exact same move, 3 palms supporting the heavens. This was because Ling Tian's unique skill locked onto Yu Tian's current position, and only the abstruse and profound 3 palms skill could counter his move. Of course, if one didn't care about their identity, they could curl themselves up and roll out of his range. However, Yu Tian was a reputable Xiantian realm expert, with his own pride. How could he do something so shameless? Hong! Another earth-shattering sound enveloped the area. Ling Tian's courtyard looked as though it were grass in the midst of a typhoon, with their surroundings being swept away. The dirt on the ground rose up into the air, forming something similar to a dust devil. With the sun high up in the air, the light filtered through, turning the whole scene into a hazy patch of yellow. Yu Tian's tall and sturdy body shot even quicker down towards the ground this time. He even landed at the exact same spot, on the exact same 2 legs, without any change in position. With a poo sound, half of his body entered the ground, leaving only his waist exposed. What a tyrannical palm strike with frightening strength from Ling Tian. Yu Tian let out a howl of anger, slapping his hands on both sides of the ground, and relying on the counterforce to propel himself out of the ground. He knew that he was already at a disadvantage, and thus immediately reacted to jump out of his current position. However, he had barely done so when he felt a gust of wind above his head. Ling Tian's 3rd palm strike was already hurtling towards him. Yu Tian had the impression that the weight of the entire sky was behind Ling Tian this time as he ruthlessly slapped down. This time, there was no margin for escape. Even if he was willing to throw away his face to roll out, it wasn't possible. Yu Tian gathered whatever pathetic shreds of his energy left, and let out a weird and human growl as he lifted up his hands for the 3rd time to meet Ling Tian. The strike this time could be said to be the strength of the first 2 strikes added together. Before they came into contact, Yu Tian already felt a stinging pain on his palms, as though the winds were cutting into him. 3 strikes and Ling Tian's body actually hadn't even touched the ground once. He was just like the great eagle, unfurling his wings and soaring freely through the skies, striking again and again. This was a self-created skill after Ling Tian had achieved the 9th layer of his divine shocking dragon formula, Combat Eagle 9 Revolutions. By congealing a breath of true energy, then jumping up and using the momentum gained from height to attack, every move of this skill included the essence of all his body techniques. When the opponent retaliated, the user would then make use of his force to further increase their strength. With every retaliation, each attack would be significantly stronger than the last strike, and at the 9th strike, the strength would be equivalent to more than 5 times the strength of the first. However, the only disadvantage of this skill was that it could only be used against someone of the same standard as the user. If the opponent was too weak, there wouldn't even be a need for a second blow, and because of the successive hits, one couldn't give their all for the first strike. Against a stronger opponent, if one didn't give their all, then how would they be able to survive unscathed? Hong! Another explosive sound once again. Ling Tian floated like a kite, slowly landing on the ground. With a sweep of his robes, all the dust was swept aside by him, revealing a blank area. Third Master Yu was nowhere to be seen. Ling Tian let out a smile, stroking his nose in satisfaction before heading off to his own room. "Where's my third uncle? Why is he gone?" Yu Bingyan was in a panic. The battle just now, how was it comparing notes? It was just like a matador bullfight. Before she could even see what happened, Ling Tian had beat Yu Tian till he disappeared. Just what was going on? Oh. Ling Tian came to a halt. Third Master Yu really is deserving of respect, he even knows about the 72 divine transformations. Right now, he is probably a pangolin, already frolicking deep within the earth. "You're the pangolin, you bst road." From deep within the earth came a furious bellow. It sounded like Third Master Yu, but with a depressed tone. Only then did Yu Bingyan discover that a mysterious hole had appeared out of nowhere, that resembled a well, but also a cave. Could it be that her third uncle was inside? Why did he dig a hole and bury himself in it? Could it be that he had time during the intense battle to do such a thing? During the Battle of the Tens, with her current abilities, she could only see the first blow, after which her vision was obscured by all the flying dust. She could only see Ling Tian soaring to the sky after every strike, but was unable to see what her uncle was doing. Even Ling Chen was only able to get a rough gauge of the scenario. Yu Bingyan trotted over to the mouth of the well and bent over to look at it. Strangely, she found a tuft of black grass moving about inside and got a huge shock. With a poo sound, Yu Tian extricated himself from the dirt, leaping out looking totally bedraggled. He spat out a clump of dirt as his eyes swiveled around, trying to find the location of Ling Tian. Yu Bingyan sized up Third Master Yu climbing out of the deep pit, and unconsciously took in a deep breath of cold air. Her mouth was open wide in shock. The pit that was dug out by man was actually more than 10 feet deep. The soil at the bottom was surprisingly moist, as though water was seeping out. A rich earthy smell wafted out from the mouth, and if one were to continue digging downwards for a few more meters, there might actually be a new source of well water. A fight between two people actually led to the digging of a new well. Yu Bingyan found it surprisingly shocking yet funny. Truth be told, right after the fight, Ling Tian had walked a few times around this hole, and felt that this was actually the perfect place to shape up a new well. As such, he had plans to call up a few artisans and get them to open up a new well here. He was even planning to name it the Third Master Well, such that Yu Tian would get fits every time he saw this blasted thing. All family members of the Ling family knew that their land was situated on a dry and hard piece of earth. However, the depth of it was at most little over a meter, and when Yu Tian and Ling Tian exchanged their first two moves, they had easily broken through this hard earth. The third strike of Ling Tian had actually then sent Yu Tian deep into the earth, instead of wounding him. "Where's that gigolo?" Yu Tian didn't seem any worse for wear, hollering with a black face, "Little gigolo! Get out here for this Third Master! The winner of this battle hasn't been decided, and you want to run?" "The winner hasn't been decided?" Yu Bingyan and Ling Chen couldn't help but giggle. "You've already been knocked down into the earth like a nail, and you want to talk about settling who is the victor?" This couldn't be blamed on Yu Tian as well. Ling Tian chose the perfect time to attack the third time when Yu Tian was halfway from extricating himself from the pit. As such, he could only divert half his strength to block Ling Tian, which resulted in this current state. However, if this was a life and death battle, then with his experience, Yu Tian would then have used some movement technique such as his 18 somersaults of the swallow to escape from the space lock, and there wouldn't have even been a third strike from Ling Tian, let alone knocking him into the earth. While Third Master Yu's cultivation might not be as profound as Ling Tian's, he definitely wouldn't lose just after 3 exchanges. Yu Tian screamed and raged without stopping, making a ruckus until old Madame Ling rushed over, persuading him to go over for a cup of tea. Before leaving, Third Master Yu cleared his throat and shouted, "Little brat, how dare you take liberties with this Third Master's niece? I'll come back to settle the score." Now that he finally got a chance to battle with Ling Tian, how could it let it go? However, he didn't realize that this one sentence of his threw his niece's face all out of the window. Ling Tian strolled into his study, feeling overjoyed with the process of the battle just now. While it was only 3 strikes, it was the ultimate way of how a man-to-man brawl should be fought. Even Yu Man Tian himself secretly felt delighted. Upon opening the jade box which Dongfeng Jinglei had gifted him, Ling Tian felt a second wave of elation. It was indeed a perfectly formed blood red ginseng, with even the roots intact, and even the beard whiskers clearly defined. This was actually a millennium-old blood ginseng that had taken on a human shape. The blood ginseng was naturally a spiritual treasure of heaven and earth and would only have a chance to form in a place full of ginseng plants. While its effects were ordinary in the first 1,000 years of its lifespan, when its leaves were still intact and the rhizome not formed, it was a completely different matter after a millennium. After 1,000 years, the leaves would wilt and the rhizome would form as the ginseng began to take on a darker red. After tens of years, the blood red color would then appear and only then could it be considered a blood ginseng. At that time, it could already be considered a spiritual treasure. As for the current blood ginseng, Ling Tian estimated that it wouldn't be possible for such a look to appear without a good 3,000 to 4,000 years. In his original plans, Ling Tian only aimed to produce great cyclic pellets with the ability to raise one's cultivation level by 5 years at the maximum. Now, with the ice fire lotuses as well as the blood ginseng, Ling Tian expected the prowess of his great cyclic pellets to raise one's cultivation by no less than 20 years. He laughed delightedly, lifting up the blood ginseng as though he was carrying his newborn child. He then informed Ling Chen that, no matter what, no one would be allowed to disturb him. After passing down some instructions, he then rushed into his secret chamber and isolated himself. Now that all the various herbs were gathered, Ling Tian didn't want to wait for even a second longer. It was time for the great cyclic pellet to make its appearance. Chapter 279, Pill Refining. Ling Tian hadn't left the secret chamber for a full day and night. In this day and night, Dongfeng Jinglei of the Dongfeng family had said their goodbyes to the sky-bearing imperial family and left sky-bearing. Almost at the same time, the Beiming family also left sky-bearing. The heads of the Nangong family had also requested to see Ling Tian but were all stopped by Ling Chen. Furthermore, all of the news which came from the Ling family courtyard including the movements of the Yang family and Qiang Shui were suppressed by Ling Chen. All of these would have to wait until Ling Tian came out from his secret chamber. At the same time, Yu Bingyan and Ling Chen were both worried about Ling Tian as he hadn't slept for a full day and night. Thus, they took turns pacing around the entrance of the secret chamber. The dishes that they had prepared were reheated many times before they were thrown away. More dishes would then be made, reheated, and then thrown away. Such a process was repeated at least 10 times. Ling Chen had a profound cultivation and didn't display any signs of fatigue despite not sleeping for a night. Before this, Ling Tian had also done similar things before, entering into closed-door cultivation or refining elixirs. As such, she was still at ease despite her concern. On the other hand, this was the first time that Yu Bingyan had waited for Ling Tian like that and she was filled with worry. Especially after she heard Ling Chen say that Ling Tian was trying to refine a medicine to help cure her divine black negative meridians, she was touched to the point that she wanted to burst out into tears. However, her divine black negative meridians were something that even the world's #1 Yu family had no way to cure. Just how could Ling Tian come up with a solution? Refining medicine was something that was extremely strenuous and taxing on one's body. If Ling Tian were to overwork himself from refining medicine for Yu Bingyan, wouldn't she feel guilty for her entire life? Haze. My silly Tian'. Don't you know that I would rather remain uncured for the rest of my life than see any harm fall upon you?" In this day and night, both the ladies felt as though the wait was a full year long, with Yu Bingyan especially suffering. At the start, they would still chat with each other casually to pass the time. But as time went on, both of their lips became sealed as they stared at the entrance of the secret chamber with worry all over their faces. In the secret chamber, Ling Tian had also reached a critical period. In order to refine this top-grade great cyclic pellet, Ling Tian felt that he had already made sufficient preparation, preparing large quantities of every single herb. Before this, he had even practiced the refinement method of the great cyclic pellet with ordinary herbs and would be greeted with success. Thus, Ling Tian was extremely confident that he would be able to successfully refine the great cyclic pellet. However, Ling Tian never expected that using true top-grade herbs and his previous experiments would differ so greatly. Especially to refine the blood ginseng and ice fire lotus, while they complemented each other greatly, they also opposed each other like fire and water. In the process of extracting the essence of the other herbs, everything went smoothly just like it did in his previous experiments. Just when Ling Tian confidently placed the ice fire lotus and blood ginseng into the same cauldron and carefully lit up the flame, he never expected the herbs to oppose each other upon being heated. Both the herbs each took up a side of the cauldron with an obvious separation between them. Despite trying a few times, the situation never changed. As such, this gave Ling Tian a great headache. If the two herbs wouldn't want to come into contact with each other, how would they be able to merge together to form a pill? Furthermore, these two herbs couldn't be sliced up like the other herbs. If the spiritual qi within it were to dissipate from being sliced up, the effects of the pill formed by it would be greatly reduced. Helpless, Ling Tian could only use the clumsiest method. He controlled the fire with his right hand and held onto a short dagger made of jade with his left hand, placing it on the cauldron and sending his inner qi into the cauldron through the dagger. He then used his inner qi to lock onto the two herbs and prevent them from separating. However, this method would mean that Ling Tian would have to suffer. The biggest taboo of refining pills would be the introduction of any metals. The only exception would be jade, which was not a metal. However, an item made of jade was extremely fragile and unable to endure a large amount of inner qi. Furthermore, the cauldron was made out of steel and it was half a foot thick. When Ling Tian had forged the cauldron, he had only pursued sturdiness and it was naturally extremely bulky. Now, his inner qi had to pass through the jade dagger to control the cauldron and then pass through the cauldron to control the herbs. As such, it resulted in a huge exhaustion of his inner qi. It wasn't that Ling Tian didn't want to place his palm on the cauldron directly, but if he were to do so, his palm would definitely be charred when the temperature of the cauldron increased. No matter how dense his inner qi, he wouldn't be able to fight the high temperature. But if he were to constantly supply inner qi into the cauldron, his inner qi would be exhausted extremely quickly. Even with Ling Tian's pure Xian Tian Qi of the 9th stage of the Divine Shocking Dragon formula, he was only able to endure for 2 hours before being exhausted. At that moment, the two main herbs in the cauldron had only begun to merge. Only until both the herbs had spent some time merging with each other, with their spiritual qi being able to accept each other, would the herbs not repel each other. That would also be the best time for the pill to be formed. At that same time, the flame couldn't be increased and should be maintained at an appropriate, well-controlled and balanced level. If one were to rush the formation of the pill, the herbs in the cauldron would definitely be reduced into ashes. Ling Tian could no longer back down. No matter what, I have to succeed. Ling Tian's eyes remained calm as his inner qi was transmitted steadily. A while later, he began to shut his eyes and focused on transmitting his inner qi with his left hand while his right hand controlled the fire. While the scene looked to be calm and tranquil, a great danger was boiling beneath that tranquility. 4 hours had passed. 6 hours. Ling Tian's forehead was already filled with beads of sweat, and his face had also turned pale. 12 hours had passed, and Ling Tian's face was drenched with sweat as his hair stuck onto his face with his clothes completely soaked. At the same time, his face was also unnaturally pale with an unhealthy shade of red being seen on his cheeks. The veins by his temple also began to bulge as he clenched his teeth tightly. Ling Tian never imagined that the great cyclic pellet wouldn't be fully condensed even after a full 12 hours. After all, he only took 4 hours during the experiments he had. The cauldron was like a bottomless pit, absorbing all of Ling Tian's dense Yantian qi without any signs of slowing down. At this moment, Ling Tian's inner qi was already completely exhausted. His eyesight was also becoming blurry as an unresigned spirit burned in the depths of his heart. Ling Tian then let out a loud roar and transmitted his last strand of inner qi into the cauldron. His vision went black and Ling Tian lost consciousness. But just before he lost consciousness, he could vaguely smell a strange aroma which made Ling Tian heave a sigh of relief. A long while later, Ling Tian began to wake up gradually and the fire under the cauldron had already been unknowingly extinguished. Looking at the cauldron in front of him, Ling Tian felt an inexplicable feeling in his heart. Unsure about the outcome of the refinement of the great cyclic pellet, Ling Tian didn't have the courage to even open up the pill cauldron. Taking a deep breath, Ling Tian calmed himself down and sat up slowly. Only then did he realize that his whole body was extremely weak without any strength left in his body. With a laugh, he thought to himself, even if I really failed, I must know the outcome at the very least. How can I, as a man, be acting in such a wishy-washy manner? Without hesitating any further, Ling Tian stretched out his right hand and lifted the lid of the cauldron, following which, the cauldron was slowly opened and a dense aroma spread across the room. Ling Tian then felt his whole body lighten up as though power permeated through his limbs. At the base of the cauldron, over 100 red-colored, bin-sized pills lay silently. They were all well-rounded and transparent, glistening like a diamond. The strange aroma was wafting out from the pills and one would feel a wave of relaxation fill them from just smelling the aroma. I have finally succeeded. Ling Tian shut his eyes and felt a huge burden lifted off his shoulders with a hysterical joy breaking out in his heart. At this moment, Ling Tian almost felt like bursting out in song. These pills in front of him represented the fact that Ling Tian's invincible army would be born into the world. With the strength of Ling Tian and the rest, as long as they consumed the great cyclic pellet, it would definitely add 20 years' worth of cultivation to their strength. At that time, their personal strength would definitely be unrivaled in the world. Apart from a few others, they would be invincible. During such a critical moment when war was about to break out, the ability for a sudden rise in strength made Ling Tian feel as though there was no longer anything he needed to be wary of. Ling Tian then quickly took out the jade bottles that he had previously prepared and placed the great cyclic pellets into them carefully. Only after he sealed up all the bottles and ensured that none were left in the cauldron did he let out a long sigh of relief. In that instant, he felt fatigue hit him with full force and almost fell asleep on the spot. Ling Tian then quickly stabbed himself in the thigh to wake himself up. This was definitely not the time to be sleeping but the best time to recover his inner qi. Taking out a great cyclic pellet, Ling Tian sat cross-legged on the floor and began circulating his divine shocking dragon formula. At the start, he felt that his inner core was completely empty and could only feel a small trace of inner qi swimming around his meridians. The speed of the inner qi gradually grew faster as it completed a full cycle in an instant. All of remaining inner qi in his meridians was then swept up completely as it formed a large current surging in his inner core. Ling Tian could clearly feel that he had made significant progress in his inner qi after the exhaustion today. Right at the time when his inner qi was at its peak, Ling Tian placed the great cyclic pellet in his mouth and felt a cold pill go down his throat. Shortly after that, a warm and powerful flow exploded in his inner core. An unblockable wave of medicinal effect rose in from his inner core and permeated his whole body, making him feel as though his whole body was on fire. Ling Tian then tried his best to control his inner chi to guide this powerful source of medicinal effects according to the circulation path of his divine shocking dragon formula. With a loud bang, Ling Tian felt as though his whole body was truly lit on fire. The hairband on Ling Tian's head also exploded as his long black hair shot up into the air and a powerful force burst forth from his body. At the same time, the white robe on Ling Tian's body also exploded into smithereens and he became completely naked. As Ling Tian guided the powerful medicinal effects of the great cyclic pellet, he attempted to merge it with his own inner chi but just couldn't succeed. The moment both the forces touched each other, they would be instantly separated as though they were opposite poles of a magnet. If that's the case, let me sharpen myself. Thinking about this, Ling Tian's eyes suddenly turned red and steeled his heart, circulating all of his inner chi to attack the 10th stage of the divine shocking dragon formula. Chapter 280, Distant Worries. A day and night had passed, but the secret chamber had no sound nor movement, causing Ling Chen and Yu Bingyan to be filled with anxiety. After all, it should have taken only a short amount of time for his experiment. However, they couldn't attempt to go in for fear of disturbing him and so could only wait outside. They had cried until no tears were left, and they were only left with self-reproach. The door of the secret chamber suddenly opened with a clack sound, and the eyes of both ladies suddenly widened. They saw the door opening up a crack, followed by a head full of disheveled hair poking out. Who was this person? Both ladies jumped up and let out a cry of fright. A bitter smile surfaced on the face in question. Who else could it be but Ling Tian? Tian''G.T.R. Are you alright? How did you become like this? After the initial shock, Yu Bingyan finally recognized him, and while she felt reassured, she realized that something was off somewhere, and couldn't help but curiously ask. Young noble? Feelings of warmth surfaced in the eyes of Ling Chen. She had heard Ling Tian mention that the refinement of pellets was a dangerous task, and this one day and night felt like an eternity of slow torture to Ling Chen. She regretted that she hadn't insisted on following her young noble in to assist him. Many a time she considered smashing the stone door to enter, but was afraid of the consequences and so held herself back. Now that Ling Tian was safe and sound, she felt full of joy but unable to speak a single word. Oh, Chenner, don't panic. I only got my clothes dirty. Ling Tian seemed to have more to say but stopped himself there. Help me get a new set of clothes, I'll change before meeting you two. The two females were already euphoric upon seeing his presence. What more would they care about what he said? With a uniform squeal, they threw themselves at the door and at his naked body. Ling Tian helplessly raised his head to lament at the sky. I've been completely exposed, now this is really what it means to have one's reputation go down the drain. I can't believe how these two could be so emotional. His chest was already hot and wet with all their tears. After the brief emotional moment, the two ladies discovered that something was different, and looked downwards. Only to immediately let out an ear-piercing scream. The two heaven-toppling beauties were blushing so much they looked like monkeys' bottoms, and they immediately covered their eyes with their hands, rushing out as though they had seen a ghost. Chenner, don't forget about my clothes. The great young noble Ling was left standing there with a reddened face, his hands covering his essential part as he anxiously called out. However, he stopped in mid-sentence, as he realized that the two lasses were already long gone with even their shadows nowhere to be seen. A sneaky thought rose in his head, and after looking around, he ended up with one hand holding onto a jade bottle, and the other clutching on a cloth wrapped around his waist as he sneakily exited the secret chamber. Haze, streaking in public, a 100% streaker. Ling Tian leisurely sat down on the chair, lightly blowing at the froth of his hot tea, appearing contented and relaxed. His hand unconsciously rubbed his belly as he let out a bitter smile. After Ling Chen and Yu Bingyan had run away due to the shameful sight, they actually both agreed to go to the kitchen and whip up something for him. Each dish was furthermore personally handmade by the ladies, and the two of them sat beside him as they watched him eat, as though it was some beautiful once-in-a-lifetime scene. Not too much and not too little, a total of 8 dishes. Ling Tian and Yu Bingyan both made 4 dishes, and every dish was extremely bountiful, heaped up in a pile, as though they were afraid that their dinner guest wouldn't be full. As such, this meal was, of course, unbearably painful for Ling Tian. Whichever plate he took more from, he would immediately be greeted with a supercilious look from the other party. The 8 dishes seemed to have become a battleground in which the two ladies fought to be the ultimate winner. Ling Tian was naturally familiar with Ling Tian's taste, and thus the sweet and sour carp that she made was delicious beyond words. Ling Tian unknowingly finished the dish in one go, which almost caused the little miss of the Yu family to cry out in frustration. As such, he had no choice but to send the pig ears in soy sauce down his stomach. However, how much of an expectation could you have of a lass that grew up in an aristocratic family? Ling Tian just had to grin and bear it, and with every successive dish, it was one of wonderful, vibrant tastes, followed by a tearful experience, all the way till the 8 dishes were finished. There was no other alternative, and as the two ladies happily took the plates and went off, our poor young noble Ling was left there with a belly bulging like a soccer ball. He was unable to stop himself from rolling his eyes at them, but also repeatedly praised their cooking, saying that he was able to eat a few more plates of such delicacies. Seeing that Ling Tian was already full, Ling Tian went over to the study to gather all the reports and intelligence and rushed over. This apparently had the effect of Ling Tian forgetting the pain of his splitting stomach, and as he stared at the reports his face grew stern and worried. This was because Ling Tian realized that he was not only a warrior and a leader but also the spiritual support for all of his underlings. Whether it was an unsolvable problem for them or a matter that needed clarification, they would all deliver it to his place to await his decisions. While such a system might seem like it was united and tight-knit, it was also frail beyond compare, as the entire group would crumble the moment something happened to him. This was because everyone relied on him in the end. What would happen if he were to disappear one day? If something like a few days ago happened again, and he was occupied and unable to deal with any matters at hand, then what would happen? Other than him, there needed to be someone who could step up and handle his position. It was a lucky thing that nothing major had happened, and after half a day, he managed to settle everything. However, from a different viewpoint, what would happen if it was a life and death matter? If there was a sudden power struggle in the continent, what would happen? When experts battle, even a slight difference becomes obvious. This phrase couldn't be more aptly used right here. Considering all this, Ling Tian broke out in a cold sweat. While he was inclined to take responsibility, he was after all still human. As a martial artist, he had to make time to cultivate and analyze his own comprehension. As the soul of his army, he also couldn't avoid going out to the battlefield. All these would definitely affect the way he handled his documents, and in an urgent scenario, these harmless defects would actually add up to form a life-threatening wound. Such a situation had to change. But what should be the turning point? Or a better way to put it would be, what was the crucial factor that needed to be amended? Ling Tian stood up and paced. He suddenly commanded in a grave tone, "Chenner, inform all the heads in my organization, as well as their second-in-command to drop everything they have and rush to the Ling family courtyard within 2 days. Those that fail to do so, behead them." Ling Tian immediately straightened and replied respectfully, "Yes, young noble." This was the first time Ling Tian had ever delivered an order with the words "those that fail to do so, behead them." Ling Tian noticed something out of the ordinary, and thus didn't dare tarry, rushing to her room to send out the order. Yu Bingyan also felt the atmosphere of the room change somewhat, and looking at the stern look on Ling Tian's face, she quietly remained in the corner, not daring to let out a sound. Ling Tian furrowed his brows as he played with a piece of small paper. From the news received, he realized that while the news from outside his city was getting lesser and lesser, those within his city were actually increasing in number. From all these little intelligence papers, Ling Tian could already smell the approaching storm. Every influential power was being extremely prudent, carefully minimizing their actions in maintaining their empires without showing their exact strength of troops. Every empire didn't involve themselves in any large-scale military activities, instead going through their daily affairs being as ordinary as they could be. However, Ling Tian astutely discovered that every major power was secretly augmenting the troops in their countries, and each one of them also carried an objective with them. The crucial point was that all these elite soldiers seemed to be converging at a point in the continent, Sky-bearing. The central point of Heavenly Star continent, Sky-bearing, was the only place that was governing over fertile plains instead of mountainous regions, with plentiful rations and satisfied peasants. Now it seemed like the greedy monarchs from all the different empires in all directions were eyeing this fat piece of meat. The prosperity and decline of Sky-bearing was something that concerned the direction of where worldly affairs would head towards, and was also the place most sought after by armies. Since time immemorial, there existed a saying, if one wished to conquer all under heavens, one had to take down Sky-bearing first. Before conquering Sky-bearing, everything else would be difficult. Judging by the restlessness of all the other countries, these ambitious folks appear to be unable to conceal themselves for much longer. Of course, with the appearance of the Heaven Splitter, it was enough to be the catalyst to increase the pace leading to a blown-out war. Ling Tian let out a long sigh. Ling Chen walked in from the outside, standing up her spot behind him, silently standing there. Regarding Yi Beif, Ling Tian waved the note he was holding. What is going on? Chapter 281, Pine Forest. Ling Chen took the note to take a look and couldn't help but smile. When we ambushed the Ximen family and Blood Slaughter Pavilion, we didn't find a trace of Yi Beif from the start to the end of the whole incident. Yi Beif's martial arts aren't weak, and he has a resolute personality. If he were to be left alone to do as he wishes, he would be a possible threat to young noble's plans. Thus, when young noble was dealing with Ximen King in the Smoky Thea Tower, I got Ling Tian to lead Ling Qi and the rest to the hiding spot of the Blood Slaughter Pavilion. Just as we had expected, Yi Beif had not recovered from his injuries yet and didn't have anyone to guard him. Thus, Ling Tian and the rest had captured him without much difficulty, and he is presently being locked up in the Ling family courtyard. With regards to Yi Beif, Ling Chen was extremely wary towards him. While she had beaten Yi Beif before, his martial arts were no weaker than Ling Tian and his means were cruel and unscrupulous, thus making him a difficult enemy to deal with. Especially after how Ling Tian had wiped out almost all of the assassins of the Blood Slaughter Pavilion, it was inevitable for Ling Tian to form an irreconcilable blood feud with Yi Beif and the organization behind him. If Yi Beif were to be let loose in Sky-bearing, he would definitely hide in the shadows to wait for an opportunity. With his bizarre assassination methods, he was definitely a threat to Ling Tian and the whole Ling family. Thus, this was the first time Ling Chen had issued an order before receiving Ling Tian's approval. Ling Tian let out a smile and praised, "Good job, it was a good decision." After considering for a moment, he said, "Yi Beif is a rare assassin and it would be a waste for him to be killed. I will decide how to deal with him after I have a conversation with him." After which, Ling Tian skimmed through the other slips of paper, saying as he read them, "Chenner, you and Yenner should go to the secret chamber to consume a great cyclic pellet each. Your divine ice formula would be a good complement to the elementally opposing great cyclic pellet. You should only let Yenner consume the pill after you have completely refined the medicinal effect of the pill. You should help her to digest the surging medicinal effect of the great cyclic pellet and help her to nurse her illness. With the aid of your divine ice formula, you would definitely achieve twice the effect with half the effort. Right, about that Qiang Shui." Before he finished his sentence, Ling Tian realized that the last few strips of paper was news regarding Qiang Shui and couldn't help but be startled. She led her men and left sky-bearing today morning? Ling Tian asked with a frown. In which direction did she go towards? Ling Chen thought for a moment before replying. She should have left with the envoy of Northern Wei and should have gone to Northern Wei. After thinking for a while, she added on, this piece of news came from the Violent Wind Gang less than 4 hours ago and it shouldn't be wrong. Less than 4 hours ago. Ling Tian paced around and felt that something was wrong. Qian Shui obviously showed signs of colluding with Skybearing's imperial family, and the Ling family was still unaware of it, as it was probably due to the imperial family concealing the matter. But right at this critical moment where a battle could break out between Skybearing and Northern Wei at any time, Qian Shui had actually gone with the Northern Wei's envoy. This made Ling Tian feel extremely uncomfortable, as an inexplicable sense of danger filled his heart. Chenner, you can shut down all the traps in the secret chamber when helping Yanner consume the great cyclic pellet. Don't come out first, and you can only leave the secret chamber after the medicinal effect of the great cyclic pellet is fully refined. I will follow them secretly to see what is going on. You can order Ling Jian to follow behind me. Ling Tian then walked towards the outside, disappearing the moment he said the last word. A loud neigh could then be heard, and the sound of a galloping horse became more and more distant. From Ling Tian's expression, Ling Chen could tell that something was wrong, so she immediately sent the order out to Ling Jian. Ever since Ling Tian tested the great cyclic pellet in the secret chamber, he could feel that the great cyclic pellet was indeed extremely effective in increasing one's cultivation. From the density of his own inner chi, Ling Tian could feel that his cultivation had taken a large step forward. The martial techniques which he had to strain himself to use could now be freely executed. The only pity was the fact that the great cyclic pellet was only able to increase the amount of inner chi but not his personal realm. While the density of his inner chi could be increased, his personal realm could only be slowly comprehended from countless battles. Only then would he be able to achieve another breakthrough in his divine shocking dragon formula. In the secret chamber, Ling Yan didn't manage to break through into the 10th stage of the divine shocking dragon formula. In truth, he also didn't think that he was able to achieve that breakthrough. Each of the last 3 stages of the divine shocking dragon formula was at least 2 times more difficult than the previous stage. Furthermore, he would feel as though he was dragged into hell when he attacked certain acupoints. The only reason why Ling Tian tried to attack the 10th stage this time was because the medicinal effect of the great cyclic pellet was far too vigorous and he was helpless in dispelling it. His own inner chi and the portion he had absorbed was already opposing the medicinal effect of the external source of inner chi as it ran rampant in his meridians. However, Ling Tian didn't wish to waste the unabsorbed portion of the inner chi and could only force it to merge with his inner chi by attacking the 10th stage. The inner chi which had already absorbed could naturally be effortlessly controlled by him. However, the remaining medicinal effect was like an unpolished gem in his body, making his body feel as though it was on fire. Furthermore, the process of attacking the next stage was filled with pain and agony, as though the medicinal effect was like unpolished jade being ground and polished, like magma being cooled to become a warm current. Indeed, after the brutal process of attacking the 10th stage, the unabsorbed medicinal effect had all been transformed into pure inner chi, merging together with Ling Tian's inner chi. However, this first experience at attacking the 10th stage had already made Ling Tian feel as though he had been through hell. Just why did Ling Tian dare to let Yu Bingyan and Ling Chen consume the great cyclic pellet, despite his inability to absorb it at his own cultivation realm? This was because of the fact that everything in nature had an opposing force and could complement each other. The main ingredients to refining the great cyclic pellet this time was the blood ginseng and ice fire lotus. The ice fire lotus had both fire and ice element in harmony, with the ice element being slightly more dominant. As for the blood ginseng, it was a yang item with a pure fire element. Thus, while the medicinal effect of the great cyclic pellet was far more powerful than an ordinary great cyclic pellet, it also tended towards the fire element. If an ordinary person were to consume the pill, he would definitely be tortured by the pure yang fire element. Even with Ling Tian's ability, he felt as though his whole body was lit on fire and had to go through a torturous process before fully absorbing all the medicinal effect of the Great Cyclic Pellet. Thus, while the Great Cyclic Pellet was a top-grade one, Ling Tian, Ling Qi and the rest would probably also be tortured by the consumption of the pill. All items in the world would have something else that opposes it. A pure yang Great Cyclic Pellet was the best nourishment for someone who cultivates the Divine Ice formula, and the Divine Ice formula would be easily able to diminish the fiery effects of the Great Cyclic Pellet. Ling Tian could even use the effect of the Great Cyclic Pellet to further purify her Divine Ice formula. Thus, by just considering the gains she could receive from the Great Cyclic Pellet, Ling Tian was a notch above the rest including Ling Tian. The reason why Ling Tian rushed out so quickly was 1, to follow Qiang Shui, and 2, to allow Ling Tian to face the medicinal effects of the Great Cyclic Pellet alone. If she could persevere through this with her own willpower, she would receive the greatest benefit. If Ling Tian were to be by the side, he would definitely take action upon seeing the look of Ling Tian suffering. However, that wouldn't be beneficial to Ling Tian's cultivation and would cause her great damage instead. If he wasn't careful, Ling Tian might be unable to make any progress in her martial arts forever. Using a pill to forcefully increase one's cultivation was originally an action which went against the heavens. If one were to receive the aid of another, then the inner qi that was gained would have come too easily. For her inner qi to come too easily, it would definitely obstruct Ling Tian's realm from increasing in future. If that's the case, even if she were to receive a 20-year boost of cultivation, her realm would forever be stagnant and the losses would far exceed the gains. But for Yu Bingyan, this wasn't a concern at all. Her divine black negative meridians would naturally neutralize the effects of the Great Cyclic Pellet, and the effects of the Great Cyclic Pellet also wouldn't increase her cultivation. The medicinal effect of the Great Cyclic Pellet would only nourish her present cultivation, and she could reap the benefits without doing anything. Furthermore, Ling Tian would be guarding by her side to ensure that nothing goes wrong. Thus, Ling Tian was not worried in the slightest. Ling Tian exited from the north gates and his horse sprinted rapidly. The scenery around him passed by him rapidly and was thrown behind him quickly. In his heart, he could feel that something frightening was about to happen. However, he was unable to tell what exactly was about to happen. If he couldn't find Qiang Shui to find out just what was about to happen, Ling Tian wouldn't be able to be at ease. Northern Wei and Skybearing weren't too far apart from each other, a mere 1,000 miles apart. Even from the capital of Northern Wei to Skybearing City, it was only 1,300 miles. A top-notch horse would easily be able to travel that distance in a few days. Ling Tian was only afraid that Qiang Shui would abandon the other troops and horses, rushing to Northern Wei with the martial arts experts around her. Thus, Ling Tian gave chase with everything he had. There was a small hill in the front with a black pine forest which stretched a few miles behind the hill. After less than 100 miles from the black pine forest was the border city of Skybearing, Nine Swallow City. At the same time, it was also the place where General Ling Zhou was guarding. From afar, a large flock of birds flew into the skies from black pine forest, letting out a loud shrill cry before flying away. There is actually an ambush ahead? Ling Tian sneered and entered the forest quickly. The moment he entered the forest, he intentionally sped up his horse before dismounting from it and letting it sprint towards the depths of the forest. Ling Tian then smiled cruelly, hee, to think that you guys would lay an ambush along the way. However, if you guys are not from the 21st century, you guys can dream about ambushing me. Do you guys really think that you are like the green-dressed expert? Forget it, this young noble will show all of you what a real ambush is. What is a real assassination? Those little tricks of yours are nothing in this young noble's eyes. Ling Tian looked towards the sky before looking towards the dense forest and small forest train. Turning around, Ling Tian had already taken off his white robes and flipped it inside out. The inner side of his white robe was actually navy blue in color, and Ling Tian blended into the pine forest as he wore the robe. At times, he would transform into an ordinary pine tree and at times a shadow in the sunlight. Chapter 282, Blood Path. Moving about in the shadows at high speed, Ling Tian's body was like a formless spirit, floating around in the forest as he went deep into the forest. A short while later, Ling Tian could suddenly smell a strange stench coming from ahead. Taking another sniff, Ling Tian was certain that it was the smell of blood. Furthermore, it was the blood of someone who had just died. About 50 feet ahead, 6 to 7 corpses lay on the ground. Just what is going on? The person who they wanted to ambush wasn't me but someone else? Ling Tian didn't dare delay as he observed his surroundings carefully. Only after he didn't realize anything strange did he drift down slowly with only the tip of his foot touching the ground. This was a habit which Ling Tian had from his previous life. Under no circumstances should he leave behind his footprint for anyone to see. While this world didn't have such high-tech methods, Ling Tian had always believed that it would never be wrong to be careful. Looking ahead, Ling Tian couldn't help but be shocked. Ling Tian had seen these 7 men before. These were all men from the Envoy Regiment of Northern Wei. In the scholarly meeting when Ling Tian invited Meng Li Ji, these men had even tried to stop him by the door. Who would have thought that they would actually die here? Just who was the one who killed them? Did the Northern Wei envoy break out into a conflict with Qiang Shuiwer? That can't be possible. From their appearances, these 7 men didn't have any injuries and their faces were still calm, looking as though they had merely fallen asleep. After a slight consideration, Ling Tian undid one of the man's shirt and couldn't help but nod his head with a mumble, "Indeed so." Following which, he undid the shirts of all the other guards and saw the same sight. In the center of their chest was a slight imprint. It wasn't red and swollen at all, and the bones under the chest weren't broken at all. Without taking a closer look, it was impossible for one to even see the injury. However, Ling Tian could immediately tell that this injury was inflicted by the dense inner chi of an expert. With a single palm strike to their chest, their bodies were shaken up by the inner chi, causing all their meridians to be ruptured and taking away their lives. From the surface, it was impossible to observe any traces of injuries. The murderer was definitely one, or a few inner chi experts. Even if the martial arts of the murderer couldn't be compared to him, it wouldn't be too far below either. To think that there may be more than one expert at such a level. Ling Tian then stood up with a smile. If there was really more than one murderer, it wouldn't be something too surprising. After all, the martial arts level of the murderer would be comparable to Yu Man Tian at the very most, and Ling Tian could deal with such an expert easily. Right when Ling Tian was about to turn around and walk away, his face suddenly changed as he turned his head around with an incredulous expression on his face. Ling Tian suddenly remembered that the looks on all 7 of their faces were the same. They were all extremely calm, as though they were sleeping. For them to have such similar expressions, it meant that there can only be one murderer. To kill someone motionlessly with a single palm strike was what Ling Tian specialized in. However, for the faces of all 7 of them to be completely calm, it showed that they had died at the same time. If not, for the 7 of them to be so near to each other, there would definitely be a look of terror on some of their faces if one of them were to die slightly later. However, not a single trace of terror could be seen. What does this represent? Exceptional inner chi with lightning-fast movement techniques and an ice-cold heart. This conclusion was far too frightening. Even if Ling Tian were to achieve another breakthrough, it was impossible for him to kill all 7 of them at the exact same time without giving them the time to even react. Just who was the murderer? Ling Tian's back was filled with cold sweat as he thought, could it be him? In Ling Tian's heart, There was only one plausible culprit, the mysterious green-dressed man. It turns out that he is here too. Why is he here for? 500,000 taels of silver. I am sorry, but I only have 500,000 taels of silver on me. However, I will get this Southern Sea sandalwood pearl for sure. This voice suddenly appeared in Ling Tian's head as the image of the green-dressed man's calm expression surfaced in his head. Oh no. So this is the case. The treasure was the cause of this calamity. It is really like the saying, a commoner is guiltless, but having a treasure is a sin. Yang Wei, who doesn't know how to control his tongue, is guilty, and even the powerful Qiang Shui isn't an exception either. Ling Tian's countenance changed completely. No wonder Qiang Shui would abandon the road and enter into this dense forest. So it was the green-dressed man who was chasing them. Ling Tian's body then lifted into their air as he sprinted forward without bothering to remain concealed. Qiang Shui, to think that you would be a victim of your own wisdom. To think that you would spend 18 million taels of silver to buy a ticket to hell. However, you must definitely not die. At the very least, you can't die before telling me your schemes. Along the way, corpses could be seen all around, and the traces of battle were becoming more and more obvious. Very obviously, Qiang Shui had changed her directions at least 7 to 8 times to shake off the chase of the green-dressed man. However, the green-dressed man would be able to catch up to her all the time. Every time they fought, a few corpses would be left behind. From the battlefield and the looks of the corpses, it was obvious that they weren't too weak either. However, their opponent was just far too frightening to the point even Ling Tian would feel fear when facing him. She really wasn't a simple character. To think that the Qiang Shui lass would be so resolute and willing to give up her subordinates. As Ling Tian sprinted, he praised her in his heart. Under such circumstances, abandoning the soldiers and protecting the general was the best choice. Obviously, Qiang Shui knew that she wouldn't be able to win even if they were to combine the strength of everyone present. Thus, she instantly decided to choose such a cruel method. She would only leave a few men behind to hold the green-dressed man back while the bulk of their troops continued on. While the green-dressed man was an expert, but with his opponents being prepared and ready to fight to the death, it wasn't impossible for them to hold him back for a short while. Through the accumulation of many short whiles, it was enough for Qiang Shui to widen their gap. The corpses increased in number as their appearance became closer and closer to each other. Furthermore, the way they died was a sight that was too appalling to endure. Ling Tian knew that the green-dressed man was already enraged by Qiang Shui's unending tricks. Thus, the force he used was no longer as well controlled as before. Ling Tian stopped and looked at 2 corpses in front of him, letting out a sigh. Ling Tian had only seen these 2 men before once but could clearly remember their appearances. Not for any other reasons, but because these 2 men were top-notch experts in the world today. These were 2 of the 8 guards by Qiang Shui's side. These 2 men also suffered tragic deaths. One of them had his forehead smashed into smithereens with blood flowing out from his nose and ears. While the blood was still flowing, he had already taken his last breath. The other person's body was folded in an odd manner, parallel to his legs. It was obvious that his backbone was already shattered. To think that these 2 experts who were extremely close to the Xiantian realm couldn't escape with their lives. Furthermore, it was obvious that the green-dressed man didn't use any weapons to kill them. If that's the case, just how frightening were the green-dressed man's martial arts? Along the way, Ling Tian had already seen more than 100 corpses, and the killing intent of this green-dressed man was probably no weaker than Ling Jian. However, such an assassin was one who Ling Tian had never heard of before. From afar, the sound of shouting could be heard with a loud bang following behind it. Ling Tian quickly determined the direction which it came from and rushed forward like a bolt of lightning. A step too late again. In the dense forest, it was obvious that fighting had already taken place. Furthermore, A large piece of land was actually void of grass and bushes, with only the soil being left. At the same time, that piece of land was 2 inches lower than the surrounding land, with the surface being extremely even. The land was cleared by the force of a palm strike. 4 corpses could be seen on the ground in 4 different directions. They were 4 of the 8 guards by Qiang Shuiver's side. At that moment, Ling Tian felt his whole body turn cold. Just what kind of strength was this? Was this the strength that a human could have? To think that he could kill over 100 people single-handedly. 6 top-notch experts dying tragic deaths one after another. The frightening cultivation of the green-dressed man, strength of his martial arts, ruthlessness of his heart, and unscrupulous means couldn't be doubted. Ling Tian was certain that if he were to face these 4 experts alone, he would definitely be able to kill the 4 of them after a period of time without any injuries. However, Ling Tian knew that it was impossible for him to kill the 4 of them in such a short time after giving chase for 1,000 miles and killing more than 100 people. No matter how strong his body was, it was still made of flesh and blood. How could he endure such exhaustion? A light wind could be felt from his back, and Ling Tian was immediately alerted, knowing that there was someone behind him. Ling Tian was shocked at the movement techniques of the person behind him, but didn't turn his head around. He couldn't turn his head around and didn't dare to do so. The moment he felt the light wind, Ling Tian was already on full alert. At this moment, while Ling Tian's back was facing the person, his whole body was already on full alert and ready to take action at any time. The moment Ling Tian turned around, he would definitely reveal an opening for his opponent to attack and would be on the losing end for sure. Facing such an expert, even a slight moment of carelessness would send him into the depths of hell. So it is you. Just as Ling Tian had expected, the person behind him was the mysterious green-dressed man. However, Ling Tian never expected the green-dressed man's tone to be so calm. Why are you here? Are you here for the Southern Seas sandalwood pearl? I know that you are also interested in this item. From his tone, while it was slightly interrogative, there wasn't an indication of him wanting to take action. Thus, Ling Tian let out a sigh of relief and turned around. Mr. is here for the treasure and your intentions are obvious. How would Ling Tian dare to create any trouble for you? Ling Tian is only here for a single person. Ling Tian turned around completely and met this mysterious expert face to face. The person in front of him was an unrivaled death god. However, Ling Tian suddenly felt his mood to be completely calm, as though it was like a still lake reflecting the affairs of the world while absorbing the mysteries of the heavens. Here for the treasure, ha ha ha, what a good guess, here for the treasure. Your guess is right, and I am here for the treasure. The green-dressed man seemed to be in a good mood as he continued, with your status, you shouldn't be putting yourself in such dangers. For you to give chase alone, are you not afraid that I will suddenly kill you? You have to know, you are probably dying to kill me in your heart to get rid of future troubles. Even if I were to kill you, it would be only right for me to do so. Chapter 283, Battle of Auras. There are some things a man should do and others that he shouldn't do. Ling Tian said proudly, I am called Ling Tian. If I were to act cowardly and not dare to come here out of fear, would I still be Ling Tian? Would I be able to rule over the world? As he said that, Ling Tian said with a trace of ridicule in his tone, furthermore, while Sir's martial arts may be high, are you sure that you can kill me? The green-dressed man was stunned for a moment as a trace of killing intent flashed past his eyes. However, Ling Tian ignored the killing intent and continued, are you really so certain that you can kill me now? No matter how powerful the green-dressed man was, he was still a human after all. After fighting the many experts in the Smoky Thea Tower, he chased after Qiang Shuiver for 1,000 miles and killed more than 100 individuals. After fighting many experts continuously, Ling Tian didn't believe that the green-dressed man wasn't exhausted at all. Therefore, Ling Tian was burning with killing intent at this moment. If Ling Tian wanted to kill the green-dressed man, This would definitely be a heaven-sent opportunity and a rare chance. The green-dressed man suddenly burst into laughter. The fact that the green-dressed man would actually burst out into laughter was uncharacteristic of him. Thus, this sudden laughter caught Ling Tian off guard. Ling Tian is Ling Tian indeed. The green-dressed man praised, "You were actually able to achieve a breakthrough in your martial arts in just a single night. No wonder you dare to face me and act so arrogantly." Ling Tian twitched his lips and said, "Thank you for the compliment. Ling Tian has been like that since I was born and have had such a character since birth." The green-dressed man shook his head, and he reverted to his usual expression. With a chilly tone, he said calmly, "It is a pity that you are wrong. Do you think that I really can't kill you now? It isn't that I couldn't kill you, it is that I didn't want to. Even in my present condition, I would be able to kill you easily." "Ha ha ha." Ling Tian burst out into laughter. "Sir, you are far too confident. Ling Tian will gladly seek some advice from you." Ling Tian would never believe that the green-dressed man would still have enough strength to kill him despite giving chase to Qiang Shui for 1,000 miles. "Do you really think that you are the #1 expert in the world?" The green-dressed man then stared at Ling Tian and said calmly, "You want to kill me?" After pausing for a moment, even the green-dressed man felt that it was an incredulous matter and repeated himself again, "You actually dare to direct killing intent at me?" All of a sudden, his aura grew violent. Ling Tian looked at him silently and circulated the inner qi in his body and said calmly, "Yes. Your existence poses far too great a threat to me. For such a chance to be right in front of me, I don't want to let go of it." The green-dressed man's sensitive intuition could already detect the killing intent in Ling Tian's heart. If Ling Tian chose to deny it, it would be completely pointless and unbecoming of his status as an expert. The green-dressed man smiled and said with a reminiscing tone, "It has been almost 10 years. In the past 10 years, no one has ever dared to say that they wanted to kill me in front of me. I finally heard it again today." He then looked at Ling Tian with mocking expression and said, "It seems that you won't give up if I don't let you try. Then let me try to kill you once." Ling Tian asked calmly, as though he was bargaining for groceries in the market. It was as though a life-and-death battle was already something extremely ordinary and unimportant in the eyes of both the green-dressed man and Ling Tian. However, these few words separated life and death. "All right." When the green-dressed man said that, he was extremely serious and cautious, "I shall let you try once." Ling Tian had already been circulating his inner qi and waiting for a chance. After hearing what the green-dressed man had said, he also replied seriously, "Thank you." The green-dressed man chuckled as his gaze sharpened, "I first heard your name 5 years ago, but only became interested in you a month ago." His tone was mellow and seemed to contain a unique rhythm. "For you to be recommended by Yi Qingchen, you are indeed extraordinary. However, I am not Yi Qingchen." Right when the green-dressed man said that, Ling Tian suddenly felt as though his surroundings were frozen and it became difficult for him to even breathe. Heaven and earth suddenly seemed to have been joined into a single entity at this moment, and Ling Tian felt as though he was a fish in a frozen lake. Even moving a finger was something difficult for him to achieve. Just what kind of a realm is this? Is this a realm that a human can achieve? The green-dressed man placed his arms behind his back and looked towards Ling Tian with a profound gaze. While he didn't make a single move, heaven and earth had shifted from his aura alone. While Ling Tian was shocked in his heart, he wasn't anxious in the slightest. He circulated his divine shocking dragon formula to the extreme at this moment. His eyes stared straight into the green-dressed man's eyes without avoiding it at all as a dense aura exploded forth. After a loud bow, both their auras collided together like two ancient spirits, colliding together with the majestic aura of the world exploding forth. It was as though time had stopped at this moment. With a loud bang, the surrounding vegetation for 100 feet around them was completely blown away, with soil and vegetation shooting out in all directions. Ling Tian's body then shook slightly, with his body almost collapsing backward before he forcefully supported himself. A trace of redness could be seen on his fair face before it quickly faded away. "You are indeed exceptional. No wonder you have the confidence to rule the heavens," the green-dressed man praised as his body leaned forward slightly. After the green-dressed man leaned forward slightly, Ling Tian suddenly felt as though the whole world was crushing towards him. Ling Tian suddenly felt as though his surroundings had become pressurized. He quickly circulated his inner chi and steam could be seen rising from his head. Then, a bolt of lightning seemed to have flashed past his eyes and he didn't let up in the slightest. With a cold laugh, Ling Tian replied, "There's still more to come." The green-dressed man then let out a neigh, as though he was surprised that Ling Tian could actually block the attack of his aura. His right foot then stepped out all of a sudden as though it carried with it the force of 1,000 catties. While his step was extremely slow, countless shadows could be seen despite the green-dressed man only taking out half a step. While it was only half a step, in the eyes of others, it was as though he had taken a few thousand half steps. Bang! The green-dressed man stepped on the ground firmly and Ling Tian felt as though the whole forest, and even the whole sky bearing, had shaken from this single step. However, his surroundings were still completely quiet. Ling Tian knew that the green-dressed man's half-step actually didn't create too much of a physical effect. In fact, even the ant that had passed by the green-dressed man's foot wasn't affected in the slightest. The tremor which Ling Tian felt was just his soul being shaken from that green-dressed man's step. To think that the actions of the green-dressed man were able to shake his very soul. It had even hindered the sensitivity of his senses. Phew! Thinking about that, Ling Tian resolutely bit down on his tongue and spat out a mouthful of blood. At the same time, he regained his clarity from the pain of the bite. He could then see that the pine forest in front of him was just like before and without any change. Ling Tian felt a sense of lingering fear in his heart and a sense of ease. The martial arts of the green-dressed man had already reached the point where he was able to manipulate nature and meld in with the heavens. Ha ha ha! The green-dressed man burst out into laughter and straightened his back. After pressuring Ling Tian with his body's inner chi, the green-dressed man who was originally leaning forward straightened his back again. Attacking and retreating at will. Attacking and defending as he wished and in complete control of his strength and actions. Ling Tian suddenly felt as though the mountain-like pressure in front of him had completely disappeared. Right when he was about to launch his full-force attack, the pressure had suddenly disappeared. Not only that, the pressure seemed to have transformed into a huge whirlpool, pulling his body forward. His right foot then couldn't help but take another step forward. This produced a loud bang, as Ling Tian's step had indeed contained the inner chi of his whole body. The whole forest began to shake from the step as the skies turned dark and countless of pine cones began dropping from the tremor. At the same time, the originally lit sky was also blocked by the swaying branches. After using all of his strength, Ling Tian was finally able to prevent himself from falling forward and preventing himself from making a fool out of himself. The green-dressed man then looked at Ling Tian with a smile as though nothing had happened. "It seems that you are definitely unable to kill me now." Ling Tian revealed a relaxed smile. "That's right, thankfully I can't kill you now." It is indeed a good thing," the green-dressed man said with joy. "It is something worth celebrating." Both of them then looked at each other and burst out into laughter together. "You are too bad," the green-dressed man said. "I really want to wait 20 years for you. At that time, a battle between us would definitely be much more interesting. In the world today, there are far too few people like us and we are destined to be lonely. What a pity, what a pity." The green-dressed man shook his head with regret. "You are growing far too quickly and some people will definitely not be able to wait anymore. If not for your noble status, you might be able to live for a longer time." "Oh?" Ling Tian said arrogantly, 20 years? That's too long. Do you think that I will take such a long time? I won't let you remain lonely for such a long time." The green-dressed man studied Ling Tian for a moment before saying with a laugh, "Perhaps it is indeed a little long for you." He then let out a sigh, "It is time for me to leave." Without even seeing his body move, the green-dressed man had disappeared completely. "I think that I will come to kill you very quickly. There are definitely some people who won't be willing to let you remain alive. If you can die under my hands, it would be your luck. Don't you agree? I really look forward to that day and yet hope that the day won't come so soon. Do you think that is extremely contradictory?" The words drifted over from afar, with the first and last word spoken at the exact same volume. However, the green-dressed man was already nowhere to be seen. "What mystical movement techniques?" Ling Tian muttered, "What a dense inner chi." Then, he said with a confident smile, "If you were to die under my hands one day, you probably won't feel indignant." A soft laugh could then be heard from afar. Chapter 284, Taking Advantage. Ling Tian then suddenly remembered about something. "Did you kill that Qiangshuier?" His voice traveled afar, echoing in the forest. "Did you kill that? Did you kill? Did you?" After which, the forest fell into a deathly silence without any response from the green-dressed man. Ling Tian didn't stay there any longer and darted farther into the forest. While Ling Tian wasn't bothered about Qiangshuier's life and death, she obviously had some relations to the sky-bearing imperial family. Furthermore, she actually went the same way with Northern Wei today and his own father had just set off to fight the Northern Wei army. Ling Tian just couldn't convince himself that their conspiracy had nothing to do with his father. While Ling Tian was also born in an aristocratic family in his past life, he had never enjoyed any kind of kinship. Instead, he was framed and ostracized and even humiliated by his so-called brothers. Only the present Ling family treated Ling Tian like a treasure, caring for him with all their heart. Thus, Ling Tian treasured the family in his present life greatly and he would never allow any harm to befall his family members. As long as there was even a slight sign that Qiangshuier was scheming something to deal with Ling Zhou, Ling Tian would never be able to ignore that fact. Despite the fact that he only suspected that something was up, Ling Tian would definitely get to the bottom of the matter. "I must stop them. Regardless of what their plan is and who their plan is targeted at. Anyone who dares to touch my Ling family must be eradicated." Ling Tian's body was like a shadow darting around in the forest. At the same time, Ling Tian made full use of all his senses to observe the forest around him. All of a sudden, Ling Tian could hear the sound of a conversation coming from afar, with the mournful wails of suffering mixed within it. Ling Tian was immediately energized upon spotting the survivors. As long as there were survivors, things would be much easier. Ling Tian then held his breath and concealed himself as he approached them. "Little princess, leave with dear first. We are all heavily injured and would be no more than a burden to you. If you were to bring us along, the important matters would be delayed. Furthermore, your injuries aren't light either and there is no need for you to concern yourself with us." The person speaking had a weak tone with heavy panting and coughing mixed into the words. It was obvious that he had suffered some heavy injuries. "Senior Jing, you don't need to mention this matter again. I led our family's 8 Dragon Soul warriors to Heavenly Star and unexpectedly offended an expert. Of the 8 warriors, 6 are dead and 2 are injured. If I were to abandon Senior Jing here, would I still be considered a human?" This was Qiangshuier's voice. However, she was slightly breathless and coughed occasionally as she spoke, obviously also suffering from internal injuries. She was no longer elegant and graceful, and her voice sounded extremely bitter. "Little princess, please don't say that," another urgent voice panted. That green-dressed man had obviously achieved the apex of martial arts and even the family head wouldn't be able to deal with him. It is already the biggest fortune for a little princess to keep your life. As though Qiang Shui was using her inner qi to treat his injuries, that person only let out a long breath. After a long while, we are extremely lucky to still be alive today. That person already heavily injured all of us, and he would definitely be able to kill us easily with his skill. After killing over 100 people, why did he leave us alive? This is just too puzzling. As these words were spoken, everyone quietened down as though they were pondering this. Qiang Shui suddenly gasped as though she came to a realization. I understand now. A few days ago, that green-dressed man said that he wanted to purchase the Southern Sea's sandalwood pearl for 500,000 taels of silver. Yang Wei from the Yang family offended that green-dressed man by insulting him and was killed because of that. Now that I think about it, who else would be able to kill Yang Wei from a distance of 500 feet? If not for the fact that he had heaven-shaking abilities, how would he dare to buy that Southern Sea sandalwood pearl for a mere 500,000 taels? I only wanted to purchase the pearl and was still extremely happy about my success. Who would have thought that the only thing I bought was a ticket to hell? Qiang Shui said with regret in her voice. Everybody immediately came to a realization but remained silent. Qiang Shui then continued, that cunning Ling Tian must have realized the strength of that green-dressed man, thus not participating in the auction for the Southern Sea's sandalwood pearl. He knew that the person who purchased the pearl would definitely not be able to escape from the green-dressed man. After that, he even took the blame for the green-dressed man and claimed that he was the one who killed Yang Wei. Not only was he able to suppress the Yang family, he was also able to help conceal the true strength of the green-dressed man, causing us to be unaware of the green-dressed man's strength. If we had known about the green-dressed man's strength, we definitely wouldn't have been willing to offend such a terrifying enemy. No matter how precious the Southern Sea's sandalwood pearl is, it can't compare to the lives of our brothers. Hayes, I am indeed inferior to him. This time, Qiang Shui had indeed overestimated Ling Tian. No matter how smart Ling Tian was, he wouldn't be able to predict so far ahead. The matters today were purely coincidental. Furthermore, they were unaware that the reason why they were able to keep their lives was 1, because the green-dressed man had already achieved his goal and was unwilling to kill anymore, and 2, the green-dressed man realized that there was another expert arriving. The brilliance of Ling Tian's concealment methods had made the green-dressed man excited to hunt his prey. After already obtaining what he had come for, the green-dressed man immediately turned around to face the expert behind him. After the green-dressed man realized that the one behind him was Ling Tian, he immediately knew that the person who would benefit the most from Qiang Shui dying was definitely Ling Tian. So, he no longer had the heart to kill Qiang Shui. The green-dressed man was clear that Ling Tian was definitely aware of the fact that he wasn't a match for himself. Since Ling Tian still appeared despite that, the only possibility was that he was here for Qiang Shui. Under such circumstances, he would definitely end up being caught in a pincer by Qiang Shui and Ling Tian if he were to insist on killing Qiang Shui. While the green-dressed man wasn't afraid of that, he wouldn't receive any benefits from it. Thus, the green-dressed man chose to take his leave after having a small exchange with Ling Tian. After all, Qiang Shui was an insignificant figure in his heart, and his departure would be akin to giving Ling Tian a huge favor. Since he would be able to repay Ling Tian's favor for taking the blame, why not? Just from this point alone, it could be said that Ling Tian was Qiang Shui's savior. Ling Tian quickly traversed tens of feet in the forest. With the dense vegetation in the forest, touching the branches slightly would definitely create some sound. However, Ling Tian passed by the dense thickets without making a single sound. Just based on his skills of concealment, Ling Tian was without a doubt the number one in the world. Even the Saint Realm green-dressed man wouldn't be able to compete with Ling Tian in this aspect. In the front was a large clearing with 4 individuals sitting down with their legs crossed. Qiang Shui, the maid called Deer, and 2 old men. They were the two oldest and strongest guards of Qiang Shui's 8 guards. The two old men also looked alike and were probably brothers. Bloodstains could be seen on their chest, with their snow-white beard being stained with blood as well, obviously suffering from serious injuries. While Qiang Shui had already treated them with her inner qi, it was difficult for them to recover in such a short time. Among the 4 of them, the one who had the lightest injuries was the maid called Deer. Her martial arts were the weakest among the 4, and with the green-dressed man's status together with the fact that Deer was a lady, he would naturally show some mercy. Qiang Shui still had the mask made of skin covering her face, and it was difficult to see the degree of her injuries. But from the way her eyes were in disarray, it was obvious that she must have suffered some internal injuries. Together with the fact that she had used her inner qi to treat the two old man's injuries, it wouldn't be too much to say that she was completely exhausted. To the present Ling Tian, taking care of the 4 of them was no more than child's play. Ling Tian had complete confidence that he would certainly be able to capture all of them. When Ling Tian arrived, he would then be able to capture all of them and take them back to the Ling residence. Just when Ling Tian's eyes gleamed and he was about to take action, the sound of branches snapping could be heard. Ling Tian then couldn't help but be stunned as he thought, someone is actually coming? Who are they? Why was this usually tranquil forest suddenly so busy today? Just by listening, Ling Tian could tell that while the people coming had a graceful movement technique, it was far from being at the mystical realm. Even if the people arriving were experts, they would be far from the level of the green-dressed man. While Qiang Shui and her 3 followers weren't able to deal with the green-dressed man, none of the 4 were weaklings. They all quickly realized that something was wrong and forced themselves to stand up, observing their surroundings with caution. Ha ha ha! We are really fated to meet here. Little princess, Zheng brothers, it has been a long time. Amiable laughter could be heard and 2 old men appeared with a warm smile on their faces. I thank Elder Yu for your concern. This little girl is indeed overwhelmed by your favor. Qiang Shui said coldly with despair in her eyes. There's no need to stand on ceremony. For Princess Shui to come to Heavenly Star from afar, how can my Yu family not be a proper host? If news about this were to spread, wouldn't the world laugh at my Yu family for being rude? I know that little princess is about to head to the north and we are also on our way back home. The elder in the lead said with a chuckle. However, he looked at Qiang Shui like a rat toying with his prey. Since we are fated to meet here today, this old man will boldly invite Princess Shui to the Yu family so we can play host. The old man with the surname of Zheng then roared, taking advantage of our plight. Is this the bearing of the number 1 family in Heavenly Star? If that's the case, our water of Heavenly Wind disdains the fact that we are mentioned in the same breath as your Yu family. Brother Zheng is taking things too seriously. We brothers have been apart for many years, and it is indeed fated for us to meet each other today. The other Yu family elder said with a wide smile. Both our families have a relationship of 1,000 years and can be said to have extremely deep ties. Can it be that Princess Shui is afraid? The moment both the old men appeared, Ling Tian recognized them immediately. They were the 2 experts who appeared to snatch the Heaven Splitter at the auction. So, they belonged to the Yu family. While the Yu family appeared to be indifferent towards the affairs of the continent, they actually sent 2 Xiantian experts in secret. Furthermore, they wanted to steal the Heaven Splitter. Just what does Yu Manlu want to do? Chapter 285, Desperate Battle. From their conversation, Ling Tian could already understand what was going on. In the world today, there were only 2 large families who were at odds with each other despite being on 2 different continents. They were Water of Heavenly Wind and Jade of Heavenly Star. It turns out that the identity of the mysterious Qiang Shui was actually the little princess of the Shui family. If that's the case, Qiang Shui's name should be the famed Shui Qiang. Who would have thought that she would travel all the way from the Heavenly Wind continent? An enraged voice could then be heard, your Yu family is despicable indeed. Despite knowing that the little princess of my Shui family was here, you guys didn't help in any way. When the little princess of my Shui family saw you guys in sky bearing, she was afraid that your Yu family might misunderstand something and cause a battle between both our families. That is why she chose to leave sky bearing early. Who would have thought that your Yu family would be so despicable to hit us when we are down? Hee hee, what a display by the #1 family of the Heavenly Star continent. The one who was speaking was Qiang Shui's personal maid. Ling Tian was startled as he heard what she said and thought to himself, this little lady has a sharp tongue indeed. If you guys were afraid of causing a misunderstanding, then why would you guys even bother coming to the Heavenly Star continent? To think that you can say that so righteously as though all of you are not in the wrong at all. However, the words of this last did give Ling Tian a new insight. Could it be possible that Qiang Shui left sky-bearing hastily because they noticed the two experts of the Yu family and were afraid that they might be ambushed by the Yu family? If that was the case, Ling Tian could be more at ease. The elder of the Yu family then said coldly, now that things have developed as such, what is the point of bickering? Does little princess really think that you can escape from our hands? Yu Zanfeng. Isn't it too early for you to say that? We have been opponents for a long time already and we can have a good gathering today. The two elders with surname Zhang straightened their backs as their auras exploded forth and their eyes gleamed with energy. It was as though their internal injuries had vanished completely. Senior Zhang. Qiang Shui let out a bitter cry as tears rolled down her cheeks. Heaven-stealing formula. The expressions of the Yu elders changed as they immediately raised their guards. Brother Zhang, with the injuries that you have, what would you be able to accomplish with the heaven-stealing formula? Aren't you guys treating your lives as a joke? On account of the fact that we know each other, this brother here advises you to dispel that tyrannical martial skill. At the very least, you would be able to keep your lives. Ling Tian, who was in the shadow, also began thinking to himself, it seems that this heaven-stealing formula is similar to the demonic body dismantling formula from my previous life. When someone is seriously injured, they can use this tyrannical secret skill to stimulate their vitality and temporarily regain their peak strength at the expense of their life. It was a secret skill which harmed one's self before even fighting the enemy. The moment the effect of the skill was over, the user would be completely crippled without any possibility of recovering. From the injuries of these two old men, there would definitely be no hope for them. Even if they were to dispel this skill right now and preserve their lives, their cultivation would definitely be crippled. Dear, leave with the princess. The little princess of our Shui family must not fall into the hands of the Yu family. After that, Elder Zhang said that. The both of them pounced towards the two Yu elders without hesitation. At the same time, they shouted out, leave quickly. We can definitely hold them off for 30 minutes. 30 minutes? Either Brother Zhang is thinking too highly of himself or looking down on us too much. The Yu elder said with a sneer and executed a palm strike at full force. The way he attacked without holding back, it was obvious that he planned to finish the battle quickly. Little princess. Dear knelt down on the floor, please leave with this servant or it'll be too late. She said while sobbing as tears rolled down her cheeks. A trace of unwillingness flashed past Qiang Shui's eyes and she knew that this was not the time to retreat. Thus, she immediately struggled free from Deer's hands and unsheathed her sword. With her body shooting into the sky, she stabbed towards one of the Yu elders. Good. Ling Tian praised in his heart, this is the right thing to do. With Qiang Shui's injuries, it would be difficult to escape from the hands of the two Yu elders in a mere 30 minutes. For her two guards to use the heaven-stealing formula at the expense of their lives, they would be equivalent to uninjured experts for a short while. This was the moment where the four of them would be the strongest. Rather than let their opponents defeat them individually, it would be best to make use of the chance where her guards had the strength to fight to seek a chance of survival in battle. The moment Qiang Shui were stabbed out, Ling Tian could already determine that the one who attempted to assassinate him at the Smoky Thea Tower was Qiang Shui. The magnificent aura surrounding her together with the splendor of her sword. The unrestrained killing intent without a single shred of hesitation. The combination of all these gave Ling Tian a mystical feeling as though he was in a strange realm. One with the sword. Despite being heavily injured and trapped in a desperate scenario, this lass actually chose to use the most exhausting but yet very powerful technique, one with the sword. The might of this attack was definitely more powerful than the attack used by Golden Leaves Baif. However, with Qiang Shui's present condition, she would only have enough strength to launch such an attack once. Qiang Shui had already displayed her determination and intention in this single attack of hers, life and death determined by this single sword. After this attack, it would either be the four of them leaving together safely or the four of them dying here. Both Ureshii elders also revealed a crazed battle intent as their eyes shone with a hysterical glow. At the same time, their attacks also became 20% more powerful. Deer clenched her teeth and wiped off the tears from her cheeks, launching her body forward at the same time. While Deer couldn't be considered much in the eyes of the green-dressed man, Ling Tian was surprised to realize that Deer's wasn't weak at all. She was almost comparable to the weakest of the five assassins, Lei Dian, and was slightly weaker at the very most. Both the elders were experienced individuals and extremely familiar with the martial arts of Water of Heavenly Wind. Knowing that it was already impossible for them to settle the battle quickly, they took a step back without hesitation. At the same time, they lost their balance for a moment before quickly stabilizing themselves again. The two elders were experts of the Yu family after all. With the confidence of victory in their hands, why would they be willing to face their four opponents head-on and end up in mutual destruction? They immediately changed their approach from ending the battle quickly to dragging the battle out. While Water of Heavenly Wind was known for their mystical movement techniques, the two elders were able to rely on their experience to hold on for a moment. As long as they could drag out the battle to the point that the two elders suffered a backlash from the heaven-stealing formula, it would be the time for their victory. However, this was the moment where the attacks of their four opponents were the most ferocious and the two elders had to be wary in order to ensure their victory. Thus, they ended up being forced to make a slight retreat. The four of them were able to overwhelm two Xianyan experts, despite their serious injuries. Just this alone would be enough to make them feel proud of themselves. However, the two elders were completely indifferent about being suppressed, and it could even be said that such a scenario was created by the two of them. They were extremely clear that this ferocious attack was only temporary and a mere desperate measure of their opponents. As long as they could withstand this wave of attacks, victory would be in their hands. A short while later, the torrential attacks finally passed and the situation changed completely. While Qiang Shui's party was still taking the initiative to attack, the elders were no longer defending completely. They would defend 90% of the time and attack 10% of the time. Furthermore, the moment the elders launched a suicidal attack, they would definitely retreat and defend regardless of how big of an advantage they had. With the experience of the two elders, they were naturally able to tell that Qiang Shui's party was starting to become exhausted. As long as they could endure to the point where Qiang Shui's party was completely spent, her party would definitely collapse without the need for them to do anything. Thus, the two elders weren't anxious at all and fought in an extremely conservative manner. No matter what, they weren't willing to fight in a head-on battle with their opponents. A short while later, one of the elders suddenly let out a battle cry and his speed increased even further, pouncing forward despite the palm strike which Yu Zanfeng sent towards him. At the same time, his palms were imbued with inner qi, and white mist could be seen coming out from them. This is no longer seeking victory in defeat but hoping to end in mutual destruction. Just this resolute action of his was enough to make one gasp with admiration. Yu Zanfeng was immediately startled. He originally thought that his opponent wouldn't be able to dodge his attack and would probably launch a suicidal attack. However, he never expected his opponent to speed up so suddenly. He quickly retracted his palm strike and defended against his opponent's attack while retreating at full speed. On the other side, the other Elder Jing suddenly sped up as well and abandoned his opponent, charging towards Yu Zanfeng. While he was much faster than before, he revealed a huge opening for his opponent when charging towards Yu Zanfeng and suffered from 2 heavy palm strikes. Qiang Shui's sword then stabbed towards the other Yu elder, trapping him in a dense wave of sword light with Deer's attack following after shortly. Originally, Qiang Shui's strength was insufficient to delay the other Yu elder, Yu Zanyun, and suffered from a palm strike after just a single exchange. However, Deer launched her attacks in a hysterical manner without any concern for her life, tangling with Yu Zanyun and making him unable to aid his partner. The two Jing brothers knew that it was impossible for them to attain victory and were thus resolute to take down their enemies with their death. Despite knowing that it would speed up their deaths, they decided to use the heaven-stealing formula again and squeeze out every last vitality in their body to speed themselves up. No matter what, they would kill one of their opponents to help create an opportunity for their little princess to escape. With both the Jing elders trapping Yu Zanfeng in a pincer attack, he was left with no route of retreat. Thus, he roared and gathered his inner qi at his back, forcefully enduring Elder Jing's attack from the back. At the same time, his palms received the Elder Jing who was in front of him with a full-force attack and he let out a concealed kick towards the Elder Jing's abdomen.